So with that, I'd like to welcome today's speaker, Dr. Natalie Smith. And Dr. Smith, who hails from California, she is a licensed psychologist who has over 21 years of experience in a variety of clinical settings. These include inpatient psychiatric hospital units, community-based inpatient and outpatient clinics for the treatment of addictions, severe mental illness and personality disorders, school counseling centers, and in mobile crisis and emergency services for hearing, hard of hearing, and deaf individuals. Dr. Smith also has private practice here in Springfield. She is fluent in American Sign Language. And today, she's going to be talking to us about surviving pandemic anxiety, the power of positive thinking. And with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Natalie. Take it away, Natalie.
Thank you, Bonnie. And I am thrilled to be here with you. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic because it's one of my very favorite topics. Now, I'm going to be talking about how your mind and how your feelings are connected. But because the presentation and what I'm going to be talking about, because of the nature of it, I'm going to use English and I'm going to ask the interpreter to sign for me for the rest of the presentation. Okay?
Okay, so voice on. Thank you again for having me. And I have about 40 minutes, give or take, to talk about a subject that's just so broad and there's so much we could cover. And it is really one of my favorite topics because what we think, we become. And what I mean by that is our mind, we have the power to change our thinking. And it's so important to realize how positive how powerful our minds are, but we are not our minds. We are not our thoughts. And once we can understand that concept and become more an observer of our thoughts, we can shift a mindset within us that is negative to positive. And today, in a very fast-forward fashion, I'm hoping to introduce some tools and techniques that may help you to do that. So right here in the front, I am mentioning Buddha. And I just want to be clear, this has nothing to do with religion. The Buddha, is one of my favorite mentors, philosophers, a person of the past, if you will, who is essentially what's considered the enlightened one. And Buddhism is a way of life, is a way of thought. And the Buddha basically is saying that when we are in tune to ourselves, we have a physical, a mental, and a spiritual self. Consider it energy. We're energetic beings, right? We've learned in biology that in every single one of our cells, there's energy, and that when we breathe in oxygen, we're breathing in the oxygen to help plenish our cells and to keep that energy moving and going. So everything on this planet is about energy. So from that perspective, when I talk about a spiritual part of us, I'm talking about that energetic part. So let's move in to what I'm saying in more detail. So we always talk about the mind. What is the mind? I've lost my mind. I'm going crazy in my mind. It's like, what exactly do we mean by that? Because if we were to do an autopsy on somebody and you open up the body, you find the brain. And if you unravel the brain, it's like this super long, squishy rope, sort of, right? But what exactly is the mind? And the mind is comprised of thoughts and feelings. And I think a lot of us, when we talk about our mind, we're essentially connecting our thoughts and our feelings together. So when I said earlier that we are not our thoughts, we're an observer of our thoughts. Think about times when you're sitting there and you're thinking. we're always thinking, and we always will be thinking, because that's what the mind does. The mind thinks. It's supposed to think. And that's the beauty of it. But it doesn't always think in a positive way. And just imagine, like in Wall Street, when you see those ticker tapes going by with all the numbers, like the Wall Street numbers going on, think of those like thoughts. Or sitting at the end of, sitting on the side of a creek and watching a bunch of debris and leaves go by. Just because we see them and we identify with them doesn't mean we have to grab them or react to them. So I'm going to go back to the Wall Street ticker tape for a minute. So if I'm sitting there and I'm a numbers person and I'm watching these numbers go by, and there's certain numbers that I get excited about, it's real easy for me without even thinking to just grab for them. And we tend to do that with our thoughts. When we believe certain things and we have certain thoughts, we tend to react and grab for them. And if they're negative thoughts, over time, we start to keep grabbing for them because we get so used to it. And then we start to internalize and think that's who we are. But what if I told you at any moment when you learn the technique of mindfulness, the ability to be completely and mindfully aware of where you are, who you are, what you're doing, what you're sensing, what you're feeling in that moment, that at any time you can say, I have the power to note the thoughts, and even if I grab for it, I can let it go because I'm not that thought. The brain does not know the difference between what's real and what's not real. So an example of that is, let's say I said, all right, I want you to imagine that I am asking you to stick out your tongue and I'm going to cut a ice cold, juicy lemon. And I'm going to squeeze that lemon on your tongue and you can taste all of the juice and some of the seeds. Or imagine picking up a big old ice cold vat of dill pickle juice and you start to just chug it down. I don't know about some of you, but just the talking of dill pickles and ice cold tart lemons, I start to pucker a little bit. I start to salivate just in the back of my mouth. But if you think about it, there's no lemon, there's no pickle. I'm just describing it. So the mind will take the concept of something, have a visceral response in the body, and then it gets translated as real. And we don't realize how much we do that to ourselves in our day-to-day in terms of our thinking. Something else that's important, whatever self-story I have about myself in myself takes precedence over anything that someone says outside of me. Here's an example, and it's a silly one, but it's the only one I've got. So go with me. So let's say I wake up in the morning and I look in the mirror and I say, oh my gosh, I'm going to have one of those days. It's going to be an ugly day. I have this huge pimple on my face. I feel so ugly. And I go to work. And about 2 hours into work, somebody comes up to me and says, you look really nice today. What's my first reaction? It's, huh? What? Because what I told myself, that I am ugly, that I'm not good enough, that I don't deserve to be happy, whatever the story is, if anything on the outside contradicts that, I'm going to feel a struggle in me because in my mind, I created this concept of myself. I have a visceral response in my body, so it feels like it's real. So if somebody comes along and contradicts it, if I feel I'm ugly and somebody says you're pretty, or I feel I'm not good enough and somebody says you're really smart, or I feel that I'm not creative and I'm painting something and somebody comes along and says, that's really good. As much as we long and crave to hear those positive things, we want them, it's hard to take it in and it's hard to let it in when that story inside is negative. So it's so important to be aware of this because we really do have the power to flip that switch and change that negative story to a positive story. And the other thing that's exciting about this is when the mind leads, the feelings follow. If I tell myself in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to smile 10 times, even if I don't feel happy, if I tell my mind or my brain to do something, my body and my feelings will follow. But if I'm sitting there waiting for my feelings to dictate how I'm going to be, you may never get to that place. So you really do have the power of starting with the mind and switching the mindset so that the body, the feeling, the behaviors will follow. Okay. So, well, in relation to Buddhism, the Buddha was talking about, again, he's one of my favorite philosophers in psychology. He talks about there are 3 emotional states, and that's a little different than feelings. Of course, we have more than 3 feelings. But if you think about it, for the sake of this conversation today, there are 3 emotional states: pleasant, neutral, and unpleasant. So if you are usually in an unpleasant state of feeling, I feel depressed, I feel sad, I feel anxious, I feel overwhelmed, it's like, what can I do to at least neutralize the feeling? Maybe not even go to pleasant. See, that's the thing. We have this mind where we tend to go to absolute thinking, either all or nothing. I'm either pretty or I'm ugly. I'm either successful or I'm a failure. I'm either smart or I'm dumb. And it's like, there's no in between. But that kind of thinking can really set us up to fail, because nothing in life is really absolute, except that we're born and eventually we die. But in terms of our day-to-day and how we feel and how we perceive life, it's like, can we just allow ourselves to either note that things are either pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant, and having the power to shift that a little bit. So if I'm in unpleasant mode, can I at least allow myself to be in neutral? We tend to want to say, well, if I'm feeling depressed, I must go to the other extreme of being happy. And that's not necessarily a realistic thing to do to ourselves, because it's such an extreme. And life is really about in between. It's that neutral place. So this is white and this is black. Learning how to slow that absolute thinking down so that we can just somewhere fall into this area, this whole big gray area. And in the gray is life. And in the gray is all of our feelings. But when we set ourselves up for this absolute all or nothing, right, wrong, rigid, it's really not helping us at all. It's continuing to keep us in this swaying motion like a pendulum, and we think we're accomplishing something, but we're really not. We're missing the whole point of being able to just be in the gray. And how to do that is learning how to begin to realize that although we cannot control our thoughts, I'm going to say this again, we cannot control our thoughts. Purple hair. Where did that come from? I don't know. It's the first thought I had. But it doesn't mean that I have to react to it. It doesn't mean that I have to respond to it. It doesn't mean that it identifies who I am. It's just a thought. Just like the ticker tape going by on the Wall Street with the numbers. Just like the leaves floating by in the creek. They're just thoughts. And that in and of itself is learning how to neutralize. So instead of going from one extreme to the other, can I just note the thoughts that are going on in my mind right now? Can I just note the feelings that are coming up? And I'm going to go into feelings. Feelings, they are one of my favorite things to talk about. There was a movie out, Inside Out. Those are in the middle there. Those are the symbols of all the different feelings. I think, my gosh, it's been so long since I've seen it. I think blue was depression, red was anger, green was envy, maybe. You guys probably know. And the happy girl with the blue hair, obviously, she's happy. And of course, there are so many more feelings in our repertoire. In fact, I saw an interview with the director who made that movie, and he said, I wanted to incorporate so many more feelings, But the more feelings I got in there, the more convoluted it became, so it got too complicated. But I just don't want to dismiss that we don't have more feelings. So feelings, they are the internal weather. For example, outside today, it's foggy, cold, not sunny. That's weather on the outside. That's external weather. We can look at feelings as our internal weather. Just like the outside weather, they're transient, they change, and they're just internal weather states. Some of us prefer, like for example, I love the sunshine. Coming from San Diego, I love the sunshine. It took me a while to get used to the snow and the cold in Virginia and on the East Coast. And I will say to this day, snow and cold is not my favorite weather state. But what I have learned to do is accept that the weather is what it is in this moment. And I could pretend that it's not there. Oh, I hate the snow and the cold, so I'm going to close the drapes and I'm just going to pretend it's not there. And the more I sit here and ruminate, when am I going to get another sunny day? When am I going to feel better? When is the sun going to come out? It feels like the weather state that I don't like, it just stays on and on and on. And we do that with our feelings. When we predict feelings or a cluster of feelings that are not fun feelings or feelings that we enjoy, or maybe even feelings that we're scared of, it's our tendency to want to push them away. Oh, it's unpleasant, so push it away, or stuff it down, or wall it up and pretend it's not there. I shouldn't have those feelings. And what happens is, well, this, and there's an expression, what we resist persists. What we resist persists. So if a feeling is trying to come up, and we don't want to feel it because we're scared or we think something bad will happen if we feel a feeling. So we just keep pushing it down. We spend more time focusing on trying to keep this negative stuff away that it's really hard to be able to just focus on the positive or the neutral. But when we understand that feelings are just more like internal weather state, like waves of the ocean, which I have at the bottom of the slide, there's big waves and there's little waves of the ocean. So if I'm standing at the edge of the ocean, and let's say I'm scared to swim, so the big waves scare me, and I'm looking out in the distance, I'm sure you've done this too, where you look out in the distance and you start to see the little movement of the wave, and you're like, I bet that's going to be a big wave, or I bet that's going to be a little wave. Just the anticipation, it hasn't even happened. My mind is going, big wave. I have a visceral response in my body, fear. And all of a sudden, I'm already feeling anxious about the anticipation of a big wave coming in. But guess what? It ended up being a little wave. And it's like, oh, phew, isn't that good? My point is we do that with our feelings. We spend so much time anticipating and fearing those negative emotions that we spend so much time trying to wall them off that we don't allow ourselves to just breathe and be, because we are afraid that if we let go of walling this off, then something bad is going to happen and we're just going to get engulfed. But what if I told you that's really not true? That feelings, like the wave, there's big waves and there's little waves. What if there's no good wave or bad wave? What if there's no good feeling or bad feeling? What if they're just feelings, just like at the ocean? What if they're just waves? If I wasn't afraid to swim and I saw the big wave, it's just a big wave. But because I identify an experience, a negative experience with that big wave, I feel fear. But if I can just stand there and acknowledge and recognize that here comes this big wave, I'm going to breathe through it. I'm just going to breathe through it. Nothing bad is going to happen. And this big wave comes and it goes. And it's like, oh, I did it. And can I allow myself to learn how to do that for me when I anticipate something negative or bad? And then there's the flip side. But what about the little waves? Or what about the positive feelings? I can really enjoy those when they're there. And you hear that expression, well, what's the point of enjoying it because the other shoe is going to drop? Well, if you think about it, feelings are like little orbs. They float around. And when they're pleasant, we invite them in. When they're unpleasant, we shoo them away. But there's still little orbs zooming around, just like the waves are big and little, and they just keep coming in and out. The more I can allow myself to just be with what is in the moment, and, oh, that's a good feeling, that's a bad feeling, as opposed to they're just feelings, the more comfortable I'm going to be in my body, so that when the good feelings come, I can go, yay, and embrace it and enjoy it. And if it goes away, it's okay. They're going to go away, because if they're orbs and in movement, that's what feelings do. And then when a negative one comes in, I can go, oh, that feeling is maybe it's anxiety, or that feeling is fear or dread. Can I just be with that feeling, breathe through it, practice mindfulness, do all the skills, which I'm going to show you in a minute what to do. Can I just bear down? Because that feeling will go away too. So the point is, if you think about it, these feelings are just around us and in us all the time. And it's learning how to be comfortable with all of them. So and one more thing, feelings are not facts. That's an important point, because just because I have a feeling, remember I said earlier, you can't control your thoughts. You also can't control your feelings. So just because I have a feeling, I feel ugly. Why? Well, because I have a big old pimple on my face. So therefore, I am ugly. And I go out into the world with this story inside myself that I'm ugly. It's not a fact. Feelings are not facts. They're just feelings. They are transient. They come and go. And the research even shows that feelings stick around for about 20 seconds. Again, 20 seconds. And we find that hard to believe, especially when we hang on to negative one, because it's like, but I'm always depressed, or I'm always anxious. I can never get rid of it. Part of it might be because you've trained yourself to spend a lot of energy and focus on the anxiety. I feel anxious. I'm trying to push it away, or whatever you're doing. But there's always that concept of anxiety. The mind doesn't know the difference between whether you're trying to get rid of it or hang on to it. It just focuses on anxiety. So mindfulness is the ability to be present to what is in this moment. And at the very end, if you want to join me, I'll do a little meditation on that. But how important it is that, let's say, for example, in this moment, I'm giving a presentation, and can I tune into my body? In this moment, I'm noticing that there's tension in my neck from something I did yesterday, and I don't know what. And, so I'm grounding into the body, and I'm noting, and I'm being mindful of what is happening in me and around me. And the more I'm aware and in tune to this person and this body and this experience in this moment, I can actually become an observer, where I can step back and I can observe the thoughts that are going on in my head. I can observe the feelings that are going on. Usually we feel feelings in our stomach and our chest. We hold them in tension spots like our neck or our shoulders, our stomach. We get headaches. And that's just the body trying to communicate with us, especially when we're not paying attention to our feelings and our experiences. Even when we check out, I don't want to feel that feeling. That anxiety is too scary. Our bodies hold and store everything and forget nothing. So even if we're not fully aware, or we can't say, I wonder why I have a headache, if we really look within, chances are the answers are within us. We're just not fully aware. So mindfulness is an important skill to have in your toolbox. So what is anxiety? Anxiety, is it a feeling? Is it a state of being? Is it a mental illness? And the answer to that is yes, yes, and yes, and more. So anxiety is a feeling. Most people, in my private practice, when I'm working with clients on feelings, I have this big stack of feeling cards. And when they pull out feelings, I say, well, what pile would you put that in? And most people say that bad pile. They put it in the bad pile. And you know what's really interesting? And I'll share this for a second. When people are done working with my feeling card, more often than not, there's a higher pile of bad feelings or negative feelings than there are the good feelings. So my point is isn't it interesting how if you have a pile like this, you spend more time trying to fight off all those feelings, and anxiety is in there. So what if we could learn to just throw all those cards together and just mix them all up? And like I said earlier, what if we could just neutralize? The mind wants to categorize. That's what the mind does. We can't control that, right? We can't control our thought, and we can't control the busy mind or the categorizing of things. But what we can do is step back and notice, oh, I categorize feelings as good and bad. So when I have these bad feelings, such as the anxiety, can I just note it? It doesn't mean anything bad is happening. It just means I'm feeling anxious, and it's a feeling. And when we allow our feeling to come up and speak to us, like, right, here are the orbs, and this one zooms in, and I say, okay, I'm going to be mindful. Who's knocking on the door right now? And I open the door, and it's anxiety. Well, my first inclination is to slam the door and go, no way, Jose. But what if I opened the door and said, hello, who are you? And it says, I'm anxiety. And I say, okay, come on in, have a seat. And I look at anxiety. What is it that you want to tell me? And anxiety stares at me and says, I'm really scared about taking this test tomorrow, or I'm really anxious about what people are going to think of me when I go to this party tonight. And it's like, okay, can I just be with that feeling? Can I just honor the fact that I am just feeling anxious in this moment because I'm afraid and I have some social anxiety? I'm scared to go to this party. And I notice my thoughts are thinking, what if people aren't going to like me? What if people don't like me? Just because I have that thought doesn't mean that that's the reality of things. Could I possibly entertain the idea that maybe, just maybe, I'm going to go to this party and chances are people will like me? Even if I don't truly believe it, I can act as if, because remember I said earlier, if you tell the mind what to do and you just start doing it, the feelings will follow. So I can tell myself, I am going to go to this party tonight, even though I'm feeling really anxious. And I'm going to imagine myself going into this party, and I'm going to smile, and I'm going to make eye contact with some people. And I'm going to trust that it will be okay. And we're going to do this, and we're going to do the best we can. And even if I don't have that full confidence, I can still do it anyway. A state of being, anxiety is also a state. Feelings are states. You also have traits. So one is more permanent, one is more transient. There are, I'm trying to get my thoughts together here so I can say it in a way that makes sense. So let me just jump to mental illness. Mental illness is it's essentially a chemical imbalance in the brain. And over time, if somebody feels anxious and doesn't really know how to gauge it and turn it down and work with it in a way that's favorable, over time, that can change the chemicals in the brain so that they essentially become fully anxious to the point where they're symptomatic and it's affecting the way they live and how they feel about themselves. And oftentimes what is helpful is to take an anti-anxiety medication, and that's something you can talk to your doctor about. But sometimes our brains are wired in such a way that we just need help with a chemical that basically what you take when you take an anti-anxiety medication is you're helping your brain replenish itself with a neurotransmitter. And a neurotransmitter, we have many in our bodies, but there's specifically two that are tied to anxiety and depression. And I'm not saying just because you feel anxious and have symptoms, it means you have to take a medication. It's complicated. But there is a mental illness, and anxiety can show up as mild, moderate, and severe. And then there's also a sense of being where things feel anxiety provoking a lot of the time, but you don't necessarily have an anxiety disorder. And then there's the feeling of anxiety. Remember the orbs floating around. Anxiety is also one of those orbs. And when you learn to work with it and not fear it or assume that it's bad, it actually can be a good guy. Anxiety is a feeling that's there to help us understand that maybe something isn't quite right. Or if you are anxious about that test tomorrow, it's letting you know, hey, maybe we need to study a little bit more. So it's not necessarily a bad feeling. It's just a feeling, and it's workable. All of our feelings are workable. It depends on how we perceive them. Okay, I need to move this over so I can read. When thinking about life, remember this. No amount of guilt can solve the past, and no amount of anxiety can change the future. So what I mean by this is this. In the past, we tend to focus on things we cannot change. That can create anxiety. We can also feel stuck, and it creates depression. A common thing that people do where they get anxious about, and it's what I call projecting into the wreckage of your future. You go into your future. So here's now, in this present moment. Truly, if I'm present in this moment, all is well. But when I start to think about the future and I start to project and I start to go, well, what if? What if I don't do well on that test? What if I don't get that job? What if he doesn't like me? And I start to what I call emotionally hyperventilate, right? I get these concepts in my head, what if, and I'm projecting about these things that are going to happen in the future, and they're not pleasant. My body starts to have a visceral response, and then I get anxious. We spend so much time doing that. It's like, why do we do that? Why do we project so much into the future, into these what ifs, when they're made up? They're not even real. So why do we do that? Well, first, our minds are wired to think. So we're thinking. It's important to remember to be the observer of the thoughts. So just because our mind goes there, it doesn't mean we have to react to it. Second, believe it or not, it's our brain trying to keep us safe. And I'll say that again, it's our brains trying to keep us safe, but it doesn't mean it's rational. Because the more we go, well, what if, but what if, what we're really trying to do is to prevent ourselves from getting hurt or rejected or looking like a failure. But remember our self-perception, if I feel like I'm a failure and I get anxious about the future because there's something that's going to happen that's going to put me in a position where I may fail, can I have a dialogue with all of this? I have so much fear and anxiety inside of me about what might happen. Can I just be in this body in this moment and take a deep breath and ground myself? Because right now in this moment, whatever I'm projecting hasn't happened yet. And chances are when it does happen, it's not going to be as bad. That's the other thing. What we anticipate is almost always worse than what really happened. The only problems that we have are in between our ears. It's self-explanatory pretty much. Here I am in this moment, taking this breath, saying this word, feeling the temperature in the air. What's already happened, what I just said, I can't change. That's the past. In the future, 5 minutes from now, I'm not sure what's going to happen. But if I'm here in this moment right now, all is well. Whatever I generate in my mind and my thoughts and predict and project, I'm creating that. Powerlessness and worry, the illusion that we have control. When we worry, we're setting ourselves up like a hamster wheel to think that we somehow have control over something. If I worry about you getting home safely and you call me when you get home and you say, I got home safely, on some level I'm thinking, because I worried about you, it got you safe. But worrying generates a lot of unnecessary energy that just wears ourselves out, and it really doesn't get us anywhere. So if you are a worrier, it's a really good idea to start thinking about not worrying so much. And sometimes that feels counterintuitive for those of us who are caretakers and we want our people to be safe and make sure everyone's happy. Because if I stop worrying about you, then you'll think I don't care. But that couldn't be further from the truth. All right, so it's okay to not be okay all the time. It's okay to not be okay all the time. We're not going to do this thing perfect. So strategies for positivism. 1, taking care of your body. If you're anxious and holding negativity and you're depressed and you're stressed and you're always on the go and you got to go and you're busy, or you're at home and you're isolated and you're feeling lonely and you're anxious about the future, how well are you taking care of your body? Are you mindful of what you're putting in your body? Are you eating your proteins? Are you eating your vegetables? Are you eating your fruit? Or are you grabbing for that fast food, mindless eating where you're just putting it in your mouth, watching TV, and not really paying attention to the quality and the nutritional value of the gas that you're putting in your body? We take much better care of our cars than we do our bodies. Sleep. How important research shows that we need anywhere between 5 to 8 hours of sleep a night. And if we're having trouble sleeping because we're chirping in our mind and we're feeling anxious, talk to somebody about furthering your skill sets and your tools so that you can become mindful in your sleep. And there's techniques and tricks to meditation that help you get to sleep, because sleep is so important for our wholeness and well-being and our health of our bodies. Mindfulness, I've already talked about that, and for the sake of time, I can't really go into much more detail, although I could talk about mindfulness in and of itself because it's such an in-depth and wonderful topic. Learning, again, this is a derivative of mindfulness, but learning to take that pause and to slow down, that the busy mind, the mind is always racing, and when we're anxious, we don't realize how our brains are always working. Can I just note that and just slow it down? The mindfulness pause is also about, here comes the thought, which I have no control. And if I feel anxious, I tend to generate a behavior or a reaction. Like, for example, when I work with emotional eaters, if I'm feeling anxious, I grab for those chips. Well, mindfulness and the pause is the ability to note the thought, I'm anxious and I want to get chips. The pause, that pregnant pause, is in between the thought and the reaction. Okay, I feel anxious. I want to eat chips. Note, just because I have that thought, does it mean that I have to go and get those chips? You know what? I'm going to choose differently because I want to take care of me, because I know that the chips are not going to make anxiety go away any more than Oreo cookies don't fix flat tires. So I'm going to choose a different reaction. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go take a walk. Meditation, reaching out to, I'm going to just keep going, reaching out to others, whether it's a therapist, a friend, a walking group, just not isolating yourself. Because when we feel shame, or we feel anxious, or we feel scared, or we feel inadequate or insecure, we tend to pull away. And I'm encouraging you to try to not do that, to override that negative story and reach out and get help. Go have some fun. Go take a walk, even if it's something neutral. Pick up a hobby. Do something creative. Try something you've never tried before. Something super simple. Go on YouTube and watch a demo. If you're interested in pastel painting, go on YouTube and watch a demonstration. It's not about doing it perfectly. It's about just allowing your mind and your body to expand. And I'll tell you something, creativity is so important. When you are doing something creative, it expands the right side of your brain and it shuts down the thinking. There is the inner critic in us. And that's something we have to control too. Well, here I am getting ready to do something creative, and I have that voice going, it's not going to be good enough. Being able to note that voice and say, stop, have a seat. Right now, I am just going to do something creative, and I'm not going to judge or criticize it. I'm just going to do something creative and have fun, and giving yourself that permission. Sometimes that takes a little practice, especially when we have inner critics that are absolutely relentless. Okay, so this is the last slide, and what I would like to do now is just invite you for just a few minutes to walk through a meditation with me. For those of you who can hear me, feel free to just close your eyes and just allow the sound of my voice to guide you. You will notice that my eyes will start to close as well, because as I do this, I am visualizing and I'm also in a calm meditative state myself. For those of you who need to keep your eyes open for the sake of reading the interpreter, that's fine too. When we tell our minds, now it's time to relax, And right now, in this moment, whether my eyes are open or my eyes are closed, I'm going to give myself this opportunity to just relax and go with this meditation for the next few minutes. So I invite you, whether you're sitting in a chair or lying down or standing, to just allow yourself to find a comfortable position and uncross your legs, uncross your arms. If your hands are folded and touching, see if you can just allow them to just lie in your lap and just be comfortable and alert. And your mind might be thinking, okay, this is weird, I'm not comfortable with this, or hey, I like this, or hey, I'm not so sure. That's okay. You're just noting the thoughts. And I invite you now to just notice your breath, the rising and falling of your chest, breathing in and out. And isn't it amazing that we have this capacity, this ability to breathe? We don't even have to think about it. That when we breathe in, we're breathing in fresh, pure oxygen into our body. And when we breathe out, we're breathing out toxins, impurities, thoughts and feelings that no longer serve us. So we're breathing in peace, and we're breathing out stress. We're breathing in relaxation. We're breathing out anxiety. Breathing in peace, and breathing out whatever no longer serves us. And just allowing and noting that the body takes in breath and breathing in and out. And see if you can just note your breathing without changing it. Just watching yourself breathe in and out, giving yourself permission to relax in this moment. And if the thoughts are chirping, you can note the thoughts as monkeys, like the monkey mind. Your thoughts are like monkeys jumping from tree to tree. We're relaxed, calm in our breath, noting the thoughts or the monkeys. We're just observing them, whatever they may be. Maybe they're, but I don't know if I'm doing this right. What am I having for lunch? My stomach just growled. I have an itch on my nose. What am I having for dinner tonight? These are your thoughts. You can still be in a relaxed state in this moment and note those thoughts. It doesn't mean you have to jump up and respond to those thoughts, because they're just thoughts, and you are an observer of your thoughts. And if you'd like, and you have an imagination, you can even transform those thoughts into butterflies. And imagine yourself opening a window and just letting those butterflies flutter away. Or transcribe the thoughts into balloons and let go of the string. And note the thoughts just go up into the air, up into the sky, and drift away. And then just gently come back to your body and note your breathing again. The breath is such an important anchor for your anxiety. And I'll say this again, your breath is an important anchor for your anxiety, because the more we tune into our breath and our breathing, the more it turns down the anxiety in our bodies, because our breath is an anchor and an emotional regulator. So when we take in a deep breath, and I invite you to do that now, take a deep breath through your nose all the way into your belly, and hold it for a second, and then just breathe out through your mouth. It automatically turns down the anxiety. It doesn't mean that it makes the problems go away, but your breath and your deep breathing, that deep breathing that goes into your belly and you hold and pause and out. Most of the time when you do that at least 3 times, it automatically becomes that regulator and turns the nervous system down. It turns the nervous system down. It doesn't mean that everything goes away, but it helps you to relax and to be in a state of attempted relaxation so that you can get your bearings, be grounded in your body, and to feel relaxed. And you have a better handle on noting and observing what's happening in you and around you. So one more deep breath into your belly and breathe out, feeling relaxed and rejuvenated. If your eyes are closed, I invite you now to just gently open your eyes, come back to this room, come back to your body, come back to this moment, feeling refreshed, hopefully. And thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. And I hope that that was helpful. And I apologize, it was so fast. But hopefully you got something out of it. And if there's anything I can do to help afterwards, or you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay. Well, thank you, Natalie. That was a really wonderful program. I'm going to double check here. I don't think we have any. No, we don't actually have any questions in the chat. But if folks have questions going forward, what is the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Oh, you are welcome to contact me on my email, which is Dr. Natalie S at gmail.com. You can reach me on my website, which is www.drnataliesmith.com. And I'm pretty accessible.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. Thank Kristen and Jan, our interpreters, and Beverly Early, our part reporter.